Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of Eli on Air, the Eli Talks interactive broadcast, in which we speak with interesting folks from across the Jewish spectrum about ideas of Jewish engagement, literacy, and identity. My name is Miriam Brousseau, and I am the Eli Talks program director, and I am thrilled to be here once again with Rabbi Hayim Herring and our cohort of very distinguished guests. We've got Amichai Lau-Levi, Barak Richman, and Lizzie Heidemann, all coming from different areas of the country to share some ideas about the role of the modern rabbi. And are rabbis in God's service? Are they concierges? How do you negotiate the tension between those two forces? There's more to come on this very meaty discussion. And I will remind everyone that this is also an interactive discussion. If you have questions to share with any of our guests or panelists, then please feel free to share them via Twitter is a great option, hashtag Eli Talks. We'll keep an eye on that. Also, if you are signed into your Google account now, you can open up that little black and yellow box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen to view this video in Google+. And from there, you can submit questions, which we would be happy to answer on the air. But with that, without any further ado, I will hand it over to Hayim to introduce the conversation a little further and say a bit more about our guests.
Thank you once again, Miriam. You've been a wonderful partner. And both Amichai and Rabbi Lizzie and Barak, I will call each of you colleagues because we are at different stages in careers and occupy different positions. But one of the purposes of Keeping Faith in Rabbis, a community conversation on rabbinical education, was to bring together people who care about the health and vibrancy of the Jewish community. And I'm not really sure that role and title and stage are as important as the passion that we bring to this care that we have through congregations, Jewish organizations, and what other ways rabbis serve, and serve along with talented volunteers as well. Today's talk is going to raise an issue of perhaps the call to service versus calls to serve on. A different way of thinking about this a little bit. In the book, the question of the rabbi's role came up quite a bit. But one of the questions that I was left with after reading the book is, to what extent do rabbis, educators of rabbis, and volunteers who work with rabbis really think about this issue of what is the ultimate service that we're about? Service of God. I think most rabbis begin with some sort of call. Abraham, hearkening back to our Avot, and Sarah. It might be Yeshayahu. There's something about a call. And at the same time, board members of all institutions are attuned to customer service, concierge service, which is service in a way that we didn't perhaps have to think about before. And I thought that a fine group of people that we have today would make for a very lively discussion. So thank you to all of my colleagues, and especially to Miriam again. And with that, I'd like to ask Rabbi Lizzie to address the first question, and then Barak and Amichai, please chime in. So, Lizzie, when you hear the phrase customer service or concierge service, what is your first reaction?
Well, what I want to go back to is actually the question that you asked a moment ago, which is, what is the ultimate service that a rabbi is called to do, or that we rabbis are called to do? Because I thought to myself, as you asked, I mean, it really depends on the rabbi, right? I mean, I know friends in rabbinical school who really felt called to be chaplains, you know, that their gifts and their talents and their passion was to be specifically in the service of one-to-one, interactions with people in life or death situations, which, truthfully, I didn't feel that was my calling. I felt my calling was something different. That probably involved service leading and music and integration of prayer and philosophy, and that would be like a hell for somebody who felt that their calling was something more pastoral. But I think what's very important is that a person who sees rabbinical school or the rabbinate as the path to manifest their calling has a deep sense of, you know, what that means to them, and is not just fitting into the mold or role that they think rabbi means. You know, there's.
I'm going to ask maybe a little bit differently, assuming that, you know, there's some sense of broader call regardless of where that path may lead an individual rabbi, or pathways down as life unfolds. When you hear the words rabbi, concierge service, what's your gut reaction to that?
My gut reaction is, you know, the truth is I'm not shocked. I feel like what maybe you're getting at is that we should be shocked when we hear this. God, the rabbi's not a concierge service. The rabbi's a spiritual leader. It's not their job to tell you, like, you know, what organization to go to, or what, you know, where to find the particular outlet that, you know, a person comes in saying, you know, God, I really just want to hook into Yiddish culture, or I really want soccer, but I want to play with Jews. And then it's our job as rabbis to figure out, like, where and how to place those people. I feel like that's part of the job of the rabbi in a community, is learning people's desires and then helping them find ways to plug into ways to find those desires met. Those may not be within my community. You know, it may be that what we provide is ecstatic Jewish worship experiences, connection to Jews through learning and prayer and social justice opportunities, and that my role actually is sometimes to say to somebody, like, here's what we do, but if what you're looking for is something else, I can put you in touch with, whether through Facebook or email, or give you the phone number of, you know, somebody else who can actually meet your needs. And I do think that's actually, you know, that's an important part of what we do, and some people more than others.
Okay, and just to clarify to everybody, I'm not looking for an answer or the answers, because I actually only have questions. So I really want you to respond as you really see fits what you're thinking and feeling. Barak, Amichai?
Well, yeah, I'll say that I think what Lizzie said at the very end is exactly right. And what's important about it is that she's characterizing a real cooperative relationship between the rabbi and the other members of the community. The concierge service is a label, I think, that's a reaction to something else. And both the label itself and what it's reacting to are both problematic. Concierge service suggests that there's some kind of hierarchy, that the rabbi is there to serve members of the community, and I don't think that's true. But I think it's a label that's used to respond to something undesirable. It's like an Obamacare label. You're trying to demean something. And part of the purpose of trying to demean this idea that the rabbi serves the individual is because far too many people have the prevailing notion that the rabbi actually is not on par, but somehow or another spiritually above the rest of the congregation. And I think both of those dynamics, both those paradigms, I think are really very problematic.
So you hear service and you hear, like, implied superiority. Amichai?
I mean, I think there's theory and practice here, and there is good news and bad news. I think for me the good news is that for centuries, to be a rabbi or to be a spiritual leader in Hebrew is shliach tzibur. Shliach tzibur is you are a messenger of the public. For whatever reason, my journey, Liz's journey, Chaim, your journey, other people's journey is to be in public service, meaning that I'm here for my own gain, but I'm here in the sight and in the service of a bigger gain. Make the world better, build community. These are my gifts. I'm offering them. And we've always done that. That's the good news. I think the challenging news is that we're living in a corporate reality. We're living in a capitalist society where people are consumers and where people are customers, and they expect customer service. And if they like you, they'll stay, and if they don't, they're going to leave and go to the next one. And we're expected to play by those rules. And on the one hand, I need to play by those rules, because otherwise my community won't grow. But I'm a to-be rabbi, and I have a young community. In other words, an emerging community. I'm getting antsy. I don't want to play by these rules. I'll give you an example. I got an email last week when Lizzie and I were together in a conference in California, and I get this email from a person in my community whom I invited to our annual celebration gala, which is a big event. for us as a community on many levels. She emails me back and she says, yeah, I'm not sure we'll be able to do it, we're busy, but my daughter's bat mitzvah is coming up in 3 years, blah, 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 blah. And I got furious. This was one of those emails that kept me up at 4 a.m., furious, thinking, what am I going to write to her? Saying, basically, you're a consumer, you're interested in your daughter's bat mitzvah, you don't care about the community, you don't show up, you just want me to serve your needs. I'm not going to play this game. So I could write a very angry email, but friends, including Lizzie, advised me to be rabbinic and to connect to the bigger story here and what Barak is saying, to think cooperation. And so I wrote her a lovely email that said, I understand that maybe this is something you can't handle, but we're building a community together. That it's not just about what you need or what I need, but it's something that will serve the greater we. Can we think together about me providing something to you, you working with us, with kids, others in the circle, not just when it rains, and not just when someone dies or when a kid becomes bar-mitzvahed, but long term. So I'm beginning to realize that we're functioning in a corporate capitalistic reality where people are consumers, and the digital is just making it worse. I'll get to that maybe later. I think Judaism has the countercultural wisdom to go beyond that and through that and say, what is a minyan? What is a circle? What does it mean to really cooperate? And I don't want to sound like kumbaya, you know, in California on a hill, but I'm in Manhattan. This is a very corporate capitalistville. And the trick here is to break that mold so that we serve each other, but that we build something together with responsibility, with loyalty. And that's a very tall order.
So Barak, Amichai made, I think, some really helpful use of language, of more organic Hebrew language, shaliach tzibur, which is not the same as concierge or customer service, but it's really drawing from the well of our own organic vocabulary of being a representative, someone authorized by a community, delegated to. When you hear shaliach tzibur, I'd like to just gauge your reaction. Does that still have some implied sense of superiority of whoever this shaliach tzibur may be? That's one. And my second question to you is, have you thought of your work as a congregational president, as a leader in the community, as in service to God?
I mean, so the answer is exactly yes. I think we're getting a little feedback. I don't know if it's my fault or somebody else's.
No, I'm getting it too.
Shaliach tzibur is a phrase.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment. If our other panelists can mute themselves, so we don't get the echo. Thanks.
I'll try it again. All right, perfect. Shaliach tzibur is a wonderful, first of all, it's a wonderful phrase. It's also a wonderful metaphor, or even description, for exactly the kind of relationship that Lizzie was saying she had with members of her congregation. And I think it's very much what Amichai was describing also, about how he tries to figure out what the needs, but also what the responsibilities are of members of his community. I think, and this is, I think, part of what the problem is, I think that the word rabbi is very different from the word shaliach tzibur. And I think that part of the problem that we're all encountering is that the traditional rabbi-congregant relationship is not one of a member of the tzibur versus a shaliach tzibur. I certainly viewed my own role as president of the shul as someone who was entrusted with a community resource, community responsibility, one in which I had to work very diligently and cooperatively with all members of the congregation. That's an extremely difficult job. Most congregations are not homogeneous. There are enormously different demands and interests, but that's what part of the challenge is. Now, there's one thing that I think I take a little bit of exception with what Amichai was describing. I do think that we do live in a corporatist world, and what I mean by that is corporations or corporate structures are kind of natural organizational forms that a lot of us fall into. the corporation is led by a board. It is where authority, responsibility is fairly concentrated within a board and within the executive. And I think a lot of synagogues have assumed that corporate structure. It also means, by the way, that it is not terribly participatory. It means that the structures are fairly ossified, and it's not very organic. I think the Jewish world, the mature Jewish world, is very corporatized, and I think that's a real problem. I think that what we need to do is break out of these organizational forms that really hamstring us and prevent us from pursuing genuinely cooperative relationships and genuinely creative relationships that our community needs us to do. So I think that the Jewish world has enormous opportunity to be anti-corporate or very creative. But we're our own worst enemy.
Amichai, maybe you'd like to respond to that, and then Lizzie. And please take yourselves off of.
Yeah. There's so much to say here. I'm aware that we are programmed as Jews and now as modern humans to live a very specific type of life. And we interact based on utility. We get what we want. If we don't like it, we move on. I left my gym after 4 years yesterday because my trainer left. And I said, I'm not loyal to the gym. It's, the other one is a block further, but I like my trainer. So I called the gym and I made up an excuse and I left. I'm not loyal to my gym. I switched. And it's the same with synagogues, it's the same with doctors, it's the same with a lot of things. And on the one hand, great. We are humans, we've got individuality and choice, much more than our grandparents ever dreamt of. On the other hand, where does loyalty come in? Where does the sense of me taking an extra step to think of you, of compassion, of other, of where I come in as a part of a we, not just a me? And I feel like as someone who's functioning in New York City, a lot of millennials and people who are General X and like myself are digitally and corporatively programmed, the it's about me thing is built in. So I want to tap into the oldest wisdom of we and offer people this building block, stepping stones into understanding what we looks like. And there are models, there aren't great models. I grew up in Israel in a very small, cozy community where we were all there for each other. I wouldn't fit there now. I broke the mold. But I don't see it in the city. Maybe it's different in the suburbs. And I think people are yearning for that type of circle of care. And I'm trying to figure out, with a new community, how do we introduce very practical steps that make people feel part of, empower them to step up, not just to be recipients and members or consumers, but to co-create. And I wouldn't say I'm up a battle, but I'm saying we're together reinventing or reimagining a contractual model that is not, it might be organic to our humanness, but as Barak said, it's not exactly where the zeitgeist is in the Jewish community right now. But I think it's the saving grace if we figure it out. Local, involved, empowered communities beyond just the peak moments.
Well, and I'm not a Manhattan issue, and I'm going to ask Lizzie, who's in Chicago, to speak, and then I'll put myself back on.
Amichai, I think it's your computer that's the culprit. Do you mind muting?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Chaim, could you repeat your question one more time? I definitely had thoughts about the conversation that we were just having, but I didn't know if you were introducing another dimension.
No, I'd like you to add your own insights, but Amichai had referenced New York several times, and I'm not sure that it's only a New York issue. It may be on steroids more in New York, but you're in the heartland like me, so maybe you can address some of those issues from your geographic point as well.
Yeah, I loved that the conversation started circling into questions of like the shaliach tzibur, what was their role, and how is that different from the rabbi, and sort of trying to root our current I don't know, dilemma conversation in historic Jewish leadership vocabulary, you know? And when I think rabbi, I think someone who has knowledge of tradition and ability to teach and transmit knowledge of tradition to flock, to community. When I think shaliach tzibur, I think someone who is so highly aware of the yearning and the needs of the community vis-a-vis prayer, that they can channel that into powerful, inspired, you know, prayer and worship leadership. That's what I think of with shaliach tzibur. And I think and that's actually a little bit different from when we think chazan. You know, we haven't talked about like a cantor, for example. There are no cantors on this panel, but like the chazan, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be completely inventing this, but I don't think so. Like the chazan is a very similar word and idea, I think, to like chazon, vision. Like there's something about being a spiritual visionary that that is what it is to sort of lead people powerfully. And all of these categories for us, I think, are in a way muddied by virtue of you know, we live in a very democratic world in which Jewish knowledge is actually available to everybody, anybody who can use the internet. You can learn how to lead services very well or very poorly, you know, by listening to recordings or by being an apprentice somewhere. And being a spiritual visionary is something that I don't think any rabbinical school or cantorial school really succeeds in teaching us how to be. And so there's this kind of desperation, I think, that we're all kind of swimming in for real spiritual visionaries and people who can create community effectively for the people who we're serving, who are all of the, you know, who are swimming in the same sea that we're describing. It's consumer, it's capitalist, and that is Chicago, and that is New York, and that is America. And we have to figure out how to be spiritual visionaries, utilizing, I think, because it's a good vocabulary and it's a good system, the best of the Jewish vocabulary and system. And I do think I do think we wrestle with the same things here, and we tend, I mean, here at Mishkan, we actually rely a lot on Torah as a guide for, I know it sounds cheesy, but like as a guide for how to organize people, you know? And so figuring out if a person's passion and skill set lays in, you know, building and taking down. They're not extroverts. They don't like talking to people. They don't like, you know, they're not the people who want to greet at the door. They're the Levites. They're the people who are going to actually like be holy schleppers of stuff into and out of spaces that we use, and that is incredibly fulfilling and really does a service for the community. A schmoozer is a different kind of a job, and somebody who's good at posting on social media, that's a different kind of a job, and somebody who knows a little something about theology because they're, you know, a PhD student at the University of Chicago or Northwestern, you know, and et cetera. Everybody can contribute in a way that's unique to them, and we're not just relying on the rabbi for the wisdom and the knowledge. But every now and again, that does come in handy when we're trying to organize our community in a way that feels authentically Jewish. But it also requires the knowledge, sort of the ear to the ground, and that's social media, and that's being, you know, being a person who listens to people, that the rabbi is not just doing that, but everybody who we think of as a community leader is trying to know and understand where people's unique skill sets are, passions are, gifts are, because, you know, once you invite somebody into leadership of some sort, even a little bit, I think the investment stops being a consumer, you know, sort of provider purchase approach, and more like, oh, we're actually building something. And, you know, so the more people who feel like they're building, the more I think we have what feels like a real holy space.
So is it the task of rabbinical schools to help cultivate spiritual visionaries? What is the role of congregational bodies or other sort of lay leadership, independent groups in that partnership, if that's what we're talking about as well?
What's the role of congregations and like chavarot and stuff if what rabbinical schools are trying to do is cultivate spiritual visionaries?
Well, if rabbinical school education, if a part of that is to help create an awareness of the role of spiritual visionary, is there an analog for lay people if we're talking partnership?
Can I break in here for a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has to make sure that we all either muted or unmuted at the right time. So Lizzie describes a really, really valuable process. She's describing, as community leader, she's identifying what everybody's skills are and making sure that everyone contributes in a way that they can uniquely contribute. And there are two really, really important attributes to that process. The first one, which she's emphasizing, is that it means you can capitalize on a wealth of talent. You have a diversity of talent, and everyone you're finding ways to have a community contribute to an institution in a way that makes the institution and the community much more robust. But the flip side of that, I think, is even more important. The relationship that she's fostering with her congregants, or congregants, probably not even the right word, her collaborators, is that they are taking ownership over the institution itself. They're taking ownership over the community. Mishkan is not something that they attend, it's something that they contribute to. And that is a really, really important element of modern religious life. I think that the effective and successful religious communities in 21st century America, and we can probably extrapolate, are ones that really capitalize on that desire and that ability to contribute, to assume ownership over the community and over the institution itself. Now, when we think about rabbinical school, we have to think very, very creatively about how to tap into that. The conventional logic, which I think is wrong, the conventional logic is, well, rabbis are no longer just teachers, they're also fundraisers, they're also communicators, they're also owners of Twitter accounts. We have to add all these additional skills into rabbinical school. And I think that's really backwards. I think what rabbinical school, and I don't know if it does it well, but I think what rabbinical school really ought to consider doing more aggressively is thinking about how a rabbi can collaborate with the associated skills that are in the congregation. I do think that means navigating a different kind of relationship with the congregation, and it might even involve harnessing and acculturating a different kind of personality. It's a very cooperative relationship. It's one that is highly dependent on members of the congregation to assume ownership and to contribute appropriately. It's a very cooperative relationship. If we can teach rabbis, much as we ought to try to teach doctors, that they can't possibly know everything. And the key to success is being able to work with others who have different skill sets. That's the making of a successful community.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Barak was just saying, and I also have a terrible admission, and that is that I charged my computer fully this morning, and it was fully on, and now it's red. I'm not sure what's going on with my Mac, but I don't have my cord with me. So I might just disappear in a terribly symbolic way of the disappearance of some voices in our community. So if I disappear, it's not because I don't like you, because my battery's dead, and I'm really sorry. I'm in someone else's office, and I don't know how to go about and find a cord. So let me say what I say now, and hopefully I'll be on as long as I can. I think we're in a paradigm shift. We're moving from the synagogues of yore, from the authority of yore, from Klal Yisrael, whatever that means, to much more localized and much more organic and interactive models that are still far and few in between, where we are co-creating. And that, again, the old news is that we've done that. That is how the old Jewish community worked. It was a small shtetl or village, and people were there for each other. The last 150 years of American and Western and top-down and the ignorance of so many Jews who don't know how to Jew or how to step up has created the top-down and the empty pews and that distance. We're about to change that. So I think the language is true. Is it congregants? Is it member? Is it co-creator? Is it shareholder? Is it, co-op friends? What does it mean? And there's stuff about that in the Hebrew language as well that we're thinking of. What is chaverim as opposed to, whatever. So it's that language, and I think it's rethinking what is a circle as opposed to front and pews, and what does it mean, the fact that people in my community might have as much say as I do once there's a vote about what programs are we doing next year, right? So democracy is awesome, and it's got its price tag, and how do we negotiate? But I think that's where we're going, because that's where the zeitgeist is going. And again, the digital and our interactivity and my choice and my tweets have a lot more to say than there were 100 years ago. So it's pros and cons on that, but that's where it's going. And if I may, as a rabbinical student at JTS, I'm not being taught to think about the new paradigm. I'm being taught in the old paradigm where I am the rabbi and let me teach you halacha. And, the ritual committee will step in. I'm clearly making it much more black and white than it is. And there's lots of nuance and there's great thinking. But I'm not sensing that this is where the majority of American Jewry is right now. The majority of American Jewry is not in the synagogue. They're not connected. The rabbinical models, the synagogue models are the old ones, and they're not where we are now. And on the one hand, we have to be with the zeitgeist. On the other hand, we have to fight the zeitgeist, be countercultural. And this is where I want to educate people, like the woman who sent me that email, lovingly, to say, that might work in your school, where you're the teacher, you're the parent, and you're in the PTA, and you think, that's not how I want a shul to run. And we need to educate each other how to use vocabulary, reformat models of responsibility, and slowly build this new sense of we.
Yeah. Let me ask one question, and that has to do with the notion of rabbi as rebbe. That hasn't come up in this conversation. I'm not really sure that it came up very much in the essays as I reflect back. That's another model. One that has to do both with, very personal service in many ways, as well as that kind of intermediary almost. Does that category resonate in some ways for the communities that we're a part of?
So I want to say something quickly before I fade away. First of all, again, and Lizzie was my teacher on this, when I responded to this woman via email last week, I did two things. First of all, I went to my Rebbe voice, and I said, this is an educational moment, not just about your bat mitzvah and my gala, but our education as a community and as people. What does it mean to move from me to we? And I tapped into Rebbe voice, and I even threw a little Hasidic teaching in there, should it, coded as modern talk. So that's number one. I think we're invited to step into our higher voice of what a Rebbe is.
Excuse me, I just have to ask, wouldn't a rabbi until there could be a panim al panim, a face-to-face, one email?
No, so I was saying, first of all, because I was in San Diego and she was in New York, and that specific thing needed a response. But then I said to her, let's please meet for coffee next week. I want to talk to you, right? It was like, let's get off the email chain here and let's meet face to face. So I think, and this is where we do get to Rebbe, and this is where this woman is coming to me because she's about to have a life cycle moment, and her husband is not Jewish, and she needs to figure it out. And this is when we need to step up as shlichei tzibur, as public servants, to know how we serve the souls of people. And for me, in this case, the Jewish serves the soul. The bottom line is, am I having a meaningful human moment in my life journey that I can help facilitate? And I feel my most important role is facilitating, addressing, and helping people make more meaning and more sense of their lives. I happen to be bringing a Jewish vocabulary and a Jewish toolbox. That's what I know.
Should someone like Barak be involved in that meeting of permission of the other individuals? Is it just the rabbi who helps make a sense, or are there partnership with people to involved in that?
I think it's case per case, but it's absolutely not about the practitioners, right? It's about a ecosystem of people. You were talking about doctors before, Barak. I'm, almost finished with Atul Gawande's Being Mortal, which is a game changer for me and for my community about how we live and how we die. And he writes a lot about the fact that doctors are busy curing, but they're not busy caring. They're thinking about, that problem, this symptom, that solution. But what about the whole gestalt of a human being? And I think a synagogue, a community, is the same way. Rabbi is not dealing with this bar mitzvah or that thing. It's about what is the gestalt here? And of course I want Barak to be involved and Lizzie to be involved and Miriam and you, and I want the grandma in, and I want the little brother in. It's a we. And again, we have it in our DNA. We're just not activating this wisdom of we.
Barak?
There are, yeah, what Amichai was saying was wonderful. There are a lot of analogies, and for those who have read the book, I rely on this analogy heavily. There are a lot of analogies between the problems of American Judaism and the problems of the American healthcare sector, and the problems with how we train rabbis versus how we train doctors. So Atul Gawande, I think, very thoughtfully says not only are doctors becoming curers and not healers. I think his indictment is fairly broad, that the American healthcare sector has really lost its humanity. You might say it's become too corporatized, too technocratized. We lose our individuality, our humanness, once we become a patient. There are a lot of causes for that very, very significant error. Most significantly, I think, is the way we've organized ourselves. And it wouldn't be a stretch to say that the modern large synagogue has organized itself mechanistically, like other factories, like hospitals, in a way that really has lost perhaps our humanity. I love Amichai's use of the word zeitgeist. Yeah, whatever. I have no intention of criticizing American 1950s and 1960s style American Judaism. I'm sure there are lots of very, very good reasons why the institutions that thrived then did so. I'm very confident saying that those institutions that were born 50 years ago are not effective now. They are not meeting our zeitgeist. Perhaps the digital age, perhaps it's millennial, perhaps it's the democratization of knowledge, as Lizzie mentioned. Whatever the reason, we are trapped within these institutional forms, the large synagogues, the rabbi-congregate relationship. It pains me to hear how Amichai is describing his educational experience, what should be really opening up his heart and his mind. Doesn't seem to be doing that. We are stuck in these ossified institutions, and it is really harming our religious expression. It's not meeting the needs that our zeitgeist is calling for. I'm very, very heartened that things like Mishkan are. But we have to appreciate how different Mishkan is from the rest of institutionalized Judaism. Say nothing of how different the Judaism that Lizzie pursues is from the Judaism that is taught at JTS. So these are some pretty core, foundational, institutional problems. And I think we have to recognize that if it's our zeitgeist, if it's our humanity that we're really trying to discover through the practice of Judaism, through the embrace of Jewish tradition, we might have to really find different organizational forms, different mechanisms of doing that. I think that means different leaders as well. But I think that the leader and what Lizzie's doing in Chicago and how she's harnessing her own skills is something that we have to figure out how to franchise, even in North Carolina.
Can I ask a question, Hayim and Barak, since now, and then there were three. So, I think what Amichai said about his current rabbinic education is, it's like it is, like your heart sort of gets, sad a little bit. My heart gets sad a little bit. I think every rabbinic program has its pros and its cons, and everybody I know who's choosing a rabbinical school is weighing out those pros and cons of all of the different places they could go and what they'll get, versus, tradition versus creativity, innovation, prayer, Talmud. There's so many different things, and I really enjoyed rabbinical school. I think I got a lot out of it, and I didn't expect it to train me to be a spiritual visionary, though, there were interactions and role models that I feel like definitely gave that to me. I talked to a lot of rabbis who are in, the institutions that we're talking about, and I think there is a consensus around the kinds of things you're describing, Barak. Just the dynamics of the institution, sort of the institutions that were built for a generation or two or three ago that we're still sort of trying to massage into working and that are really struggling to serve people. And, talk to rabbis who are very frustrated with those precise contours.
We lost audio.
Working? No? Now is it working? Yes?
Yes.
My computer is picking it up. Hello? Hello, hello, hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
We're
You
good.
you got me? Yes? Yes, okay. So all I was going to say is, I know a lot of rabbis who are frustrated in the institutions in which they currently serve, and what they'll say is, I'm really trying to change things. I have all these ideas, and the structures of committees, the board, it's like what they'll say is it's really the lay people holding us back. The people who want it to be the way that it was 25 years ago, 50 years ago, the people who are the ones who write the big checks to the shul, and so we can't get rid of the cantor who, was a great cantor, is a great cantor, but is just not doing the kind of music and participation experience people want, and that they're basically, it's not, focusing on the rabbis who are, sort of the, like getting us stuck in the mud, but it's actually the members of the community who are not spiritual visionaries. And I feel very lucky. I feel like Amichai is lucky. Any of us who are getting to create a community from whole cloth, starting fresh right now, are working with people who haven't found their homes in other institutions and sort of by definition are looking for something different, and here we are offering that. But for the people in, the institutions that exist, like how... are you giving up altogether? Is there some way to transform the landscape for lay people to be more visionary?
I just want to jump in very quickly, but then would really like Barak and since Amichai's words sort of echo on, but his presence has dropped out. Maybe Miriam, because you're not just a bystander in this conversation, maybe you can chime in. But when I was executive director of STAR, Cineplex was a framework that empowered rabbis, educators, cantors, and lay people to bring their collective talents to the table to jointly sort of re-envision the experience of Shabbat. It happened in existing congregations that were very small, in more startup congregations, and of all sizes. I will leave you with this story and then turn to Barak. One of my colleagues, who was resistant at first, but there was initially grant funding involved, so he was in. About a year later, he said to me, I realized that I've been blaming my board for not wanting to change, and I have been the impediment.
So, Lizzie, I think Chaim's answer response is part of my response. I put it in a little bit of a different way. And you do describe the situation, I think, very, very accurately. So, for starters, institutions are designed not to change. They're designed to offer stability, offer predictability, and to resist the vicissitudes of time and preferences. That's why we have them. That's why we establish rules. That's why we compartmentalize. There's a whole science of organization behind why we have institutions and what benefits they have and what consequences they have. So what's the therefore? It's not surprising that rabbis, particularly the rabbis that you talk to, are very frustrated with their boards. It should come as no surprise that the board members and the congregants that I talk to are frustrated with their rabbis. And I think Chaim's illustration that, change is sometimes easily blamed on others is, of course, a truism. But even when there is a demand to change within the board, within lay leaders, and within the rabbi, it's still hard to change. I mean, Chaim's example of a Cineplex is a great offering for experiments that mature synagogues and other institutions can do. And there always is a possibility for trying something new. And, especially if you can maintain the spirit of experimentation without committing to changing things forever, that's a wonderful thing that institutions can do to push the envelope and to try to find new ways of expressing spirituality and community. But I don't think it's an accident that you found success and Amichai has found success and so many others have not. It's very, very hard to meaningfully change with old, mature institutions, even if everyone at the table is committed to change. You described a little bit of the political economy of a synagogue, where you have the large donors traditionally are the more traditionalists. Even if they're not large donors, and even if they're not traditionalists, you still, as a synagogue, tend to resist change if there's somebody who you like and who's committed. resists change. So what's the therefore? I think that what you're doing by starting a new institution is not only the best recipe for immediate success, that is for you and your fellow travelers to find meaning. I think you are most likely to find it in a new creation than in an existing one. But I also think that you have an enormous amount to teach everybody else. I would deeply hope that Mishkan becomes much more the norm than the exception.
And Barak, I would just add lab shul as well as an experiment that Amichai is working on. But Lizzie asked you a direct question.
Okay.
And that was, are you giving up on existing congregations? My answer is no, because I've seen them change, and it is very difficult. We need to accelerate the rate at which that happens. Some are not going to make it. Some are striving to make it, and others are starting to make it. And I'd like to hear, I'm curious now, your answer to Lizzie's question.
I happen to have this on my desk right now. Look at this. Can you read that?
Exit voice and loyalty. Ooh.
Yeah. Albert Hirschman, a brilliant economist. One of the lessons from the book is that often the best expression of loyalty is exit. If I think of a traditional synagogue and what I could do to most meaningfully influence, or what you could do, Lizzie, most meaningfully influence a traditional synagogue, would be to start something else, perhaps even right across the street. Allow those institutions to learn from each other.
Barak, I had to be cross-examined as part of a mock trial.
Am I evading the question?
Way too much law and order. Yes or no? Are you saying the best strategy is to abandon existing congregations?
It's not to abandon. So you understand why I'm resisting the dichotomous question, because I often think that exit is the best way to help existing congregations. It's the best way to create new models for learning, and the best way to create lessons also and impart knowledge. And frankly, the Jewish community is so much broader than those who are represented by current institutions. If you do something new, you bring in new people, and that strengthens everything. So I am not evading the question. I'm intentionally resisting the question. But if I'm really forced to say yes or no,
yeah,
let
me rephrase it in a way that's more authentic to, I think, what you're saying, which I want to be fair to you, because I know that you're speaking from a place of a lot of volunteer time, caring, and commitment. And that's not something that we take lightly. We're just a minority, the professionals, and things don't happen without volunteers. So I guess my question is, based on the language of immediate strategies that could really sort of give a jolt, a constructive jolt to the Jewish community, are you saying that it would be a good scenario if a significant percentage, and let's not debate the number, of people who were involved in existing organizations exited them, built upon the learning of the likes of Amichai and Lizzie, and created something new?
So, as a general matter, I think the answer is yes. I do think it depends on the institution. In Durham, we have the only non-reform synagogue in town. We have an Orthodox Kehillah inside a conservative and ostensibly conservative synagogue. We also have multiple different services. We have an egalitarian minyan periodically. I think that the best way to help my synagogue would be for somebody like Lizzie to start something inside the building and not outside the building. That would be my preference. I think it would enormously enrich the congregation. It would bring a lot of energy and a lot of creativity without threatening the financial security of the institution, which of course is of concern for everybody. So if forced between a yes or no, I said no, please don't abandon. Please push the envelope inside the community. There are other institutions where I really wonder whether pushing inside the institution is the right thing. I wonder if JTS is one where revolution from the inside is better than revolution from the outside. I think an alternative seminary might be better. I think the Boston Hebrew College has done enormous amount for the what we'll call egalitarian traditional Judaism in America. I wonder if local federations would be better to harness their philanthropic mission if there were other philanthropic objectives or opportunities out there in the congregation. I wonder if United Synagogue, as an umbrella for conservative congregations, I wonder if that's just getting to be too big and too unmanageable and impossible to really reform and modernize the institution from within. I wonder if they would benefit from.
And by the way, I just, in fairness, as a neutral moderator, I need to add that while I'm not anybody's minister of defense, I think that the critiques that you're leveling at one branch of Judaism, and in full disclosure, I am a proud grad of JTS and actually had a really fine education from there. I speak with people, as does Lizzie and Miriam, from all over the country, who say similar things, just with different adjectives before the word Judaism. Reform, Reconstructionist.
Oh yeah, right. No, I certainly don't mean to pick or direct my criticism, constructive criticism, excessively at any one denomination. I do say that much like where your comment just came from, Chaim, the reason I think of United Synagogue and JTS is because that's where my heart is also. I grew up as a conservative Jew. I am deeply, deeply committed intellectually and personally to, I'll say, egalitarian traditional Judaism. I think that that's where the theology that I think not only personally meaningful, but would have enormous possibility for the vast majority of unaffiliated American Jews, has greatest power. So to a large degree, if there's anything that I happen to be thinking about that's most accessible on my frontal cortex, it's because of affection and dedication. I would like to think that this is a constructive dialogue, one that is born out of love much more than animosity.
Understood, but as with Miriam as the convener of the conversation, we just want to state for the record that we hear these things in all isolated pockets, which is why these kinds of conversations are just so incredibly valuable.
Can I chime in? Am I allowed to chime in here? So something I've been feeling for since before we began Mishkan was, there I think we're, like, all of us are like thirsty for the answer. What will be like the thing that revitalizes, what is the magic pill that we take that revitalizes the American Jewish community? Like, what's the rule? What's the, the golden halakha? And I've begun to feel like, we're in the Wild West right now. It's not that there's nothing on the landscape. There's lots of things on the landscape, some of which will inevitably run their course, some of which are experiments that will come and they'll go, some of which are experiments that will become, mainstream. Yeah, and it sort of feels to me like, basic Darwin theory. What does an organism need to do? What does an animal need to do to exist? It's either migrate when it becomes threatened, adapt, to its new reality, or die. Migrate, adapt, die. And I think there's no magic pill. And in Chicago, Mishkan has had two very significant relationships with two different conservative synagogues. One of them is Anshe Emet Synagogue, which is on the north side, and they did and are doing almost exactly what you've described, Barak. They have opened their doors and been hosts to Mishkan and the Lakeview Minyan and Windy City Minyan and, other groups that have sort of come and gone, and are just, sort of experimenting with community building. And Anshe Emet, bless Rabbi Michael Siegel for, having the vision that's big enough to say, it doesn't threaten us to open our doors to give you space to do your thing here. We might even learn something from you, And indeed, since Mishkan's been there, I do think that there's been a shift in energy. People have felt a little more, Amichai, welcome back. people have felt a little more free to experiment with the role of the rabbi, coming down off the bima, leading interactive discussions, different kinds of music, different kinds of participation. It's been very healthy for them, even as I know there have been moments of, questioning, is this, is it okay for a big conservative synagogue to house something that is new and at the cutting edge? And the answer can be yes, these things coexist and actually are mutually beneficial. And the other incredibly important relationship we have is with a synagogue that is no longer, called Shari Tikva B'nai Zion, that once upon a time was in a neighborhood, Peterson Park, that was very Jewish, and very sort of conservative Jewish. And over the last few decades has just, the Jewish population has gone away, the neighborhood's changed, and the shul wasn't ready to migrate, couldn't really adapt, and so figured out a way to create a legacy for themselves by developing a relationship with us, and ultimately, like the board president, we bat mitzvahed his daughter, and the whole congregation came, and they gave us their Torahs, and, they gave us some of their Judaica, Jewish resources, Talitot, some of their financial resources, and said, you know what, you are our legacy. We wanted to build vibrant Judaism in Chicago, and for a long time we did that. And we realized that we have run our course, and we want to leave, and we want to leave with a bang. We want to do something meaningful for the Jewish community, and the most meaningful thing we can do is fold, close our doors and give our resources to people that are doing thriving, like the next generation. And so, I see both, I sort of resist the false dichotomy, I think, of, should all the institutions close and all their members, exit en masse and go start new things? No, I don't think so. Should some of them? Maybe, because I think there are pros and cons to experimenting many different models.
I know that we're winding down in a few minutes, so Lizzie, you laid out a couple of different options for organizations: adapt, migrate, die, leave a legacy. I guess my near concluding question for all of us is, what about the option of holding on to the anxiety of not knowing for a period of time, which allows for experimentation, potential partnerships that happen within, exits that may be permanent or temporary? Isn't that what emunah is about in a way? Faith, not knowing how things are going to work out, but trusting that they are going to work out.
I liked zeitgeist more than emunah. I think, I hope nothing I said suggested that we should shut down organizations or even recruit people out of organizations. I only mean to say that our collective zeitgeist, Amichai, we've been using your word ever since, even when you were gone. That's something worth pursuing. And I think we owe it to ourselves, especially to talented leaders like Lizzie and Amichai, to try to find out what is personally meaningful for us and for our children in this modern age. And I'm making an observation. For a lot of people, the current institutions, the mature institutions, just don't have the capacity to do that. So, God bless the people who are satisfied with those institutions, but a lot of us aren't. And for that, the question is not, do we try to kill or undermine those institutions? The question is, how do we find some kind of framework that really provides personal meaning for us right now? How can we revitalize, how can all the people who are dissatisfied with current Judaism find some satisfaction? And I think that it is nothing more than the most gentlest thing to say. It might require some institutional creativity. It might require some new institutions. And a lot of what we'll be doing will be searching and following the different institutional possibilities to find personal meaning. I fear that faith makes us too passive. Emunah makes us too passive. I encourage people like Amichai and Lizzie to forge ahead and offer us new possibilities.
Oh, thanks for the clarification. Faith is a condition that one holds that should hopefully also move people to act.
I want Amichai to have the last word since he's back. So can I just say a quick thing in response to your question, and then Amichai, it's all you. I think that posture of not knowing is an incredibly important thing, and the Jewish community now, especially in this sort of perpetual crisis mode that we're in post Pew Study, but honestly before Pew Study, like I think we're in a chaotic, frantic, what's the answer kind of place, and the answer is really to hold our peace, and to continue with those of us who are doing, all of us that are doing work, whatever our work is, whatever our shlichut is, our mission, our purpose, our calling. For those of us that feel a strong sense of it, to do it with gusto, to be, for the federations and places who are feeling adventurous and can fund us, because, we're trying to do this, and then we will see where it goes, we're all doing our best here. And I think it's a very important thing to sort of withhold immediate judgment, resist the urge for immediate gratification, which is part of the zeitgeist right now, and to actually allow the work to sink in. Healing doesn't happen the second the procedure takes place. There's often a lot of recovery, healing, and growth time that's required, and that's the space that we have to hold at the same time as applying the medicine. So. Yes.
Amichai, anything?
I'm glad to be back. I figured out how to on my iPhone.
Great.
But to quote Lizzie, it takes a while. The healing was not downloaded immediately. We are heirs of a 3,000-year-old toolbox for human meaningfulness and changing the world. And we have so many good tools in our toolbox, and we have many tools that need to be discarded and others that need to be reinvented. It's happening now. Stephen Wernick, a good friend of mine, quoted, I don't remember who, that chairs and books are what changed the synagogue, for better and for worse. And it's only a couple of decades. We don't know what it looks like to live technological, digital lives that have value and meaning and intimacy and connection. We're in the middle of it, and it's my children and our children, the next generations, that will take this and run with it. It's our responsibility in this relay race to take what we inherited from the old technologies and to utilize it wisely. What I keep coming back to again and again, digital disconnected world, is vulnerability. In my shul, in my community, in my circle of care, we're focused on offering people a public moment of privacy, the ability to be broken, to be sad, to be sick, to be mourning, to be single, to be faith, but to be also sad, and to be vulnerable. And I feel like digital allows us all to put on our best face and my best profile and my best status update. I'm infallible. I craft my own reality and how you see me. And that's what happens in the digital reality. Human connection in shul, in a club, in a bar, on a park bench, allows us to see ourselves as we really are and be there for each other. And that's minyan. That is the core of the shul. And I want that vulnerability, and I want it for my children and for myself and for my community and for Nente. In this compare, it's a relay race. We inherited something good. It needs radical repackaging to work for the 21st century. Yeah.
Thank you.
Miriam, it feels like a kind of a good hiatus. I don't want to call it a stop because the conversation will continue in many other formats, but I really want to thank, again, Miriam, for working with me to sort of conceive this series, and Barak and Lizzie and Amichai. One of the things that we aspire toward, Miriam and I, is to have an unscripted conversation, fresh, candid, respectful, and one that opens up new possibilities of images, pathways that maybe will lead us to places that will be good for us. I'd like to really say thank you for making that happen today from my heart. So thank you.
Thank you for organizing it, and thank you for giving us a voice in the conversation also.
Thank
you all for being here, especially to Hayim, who has been my partner in putting all of this together. And I hope anybody who's watching, check out Keeping Faith in Rabbis. Read the ideas, wrestle with them, bring them into your own congregation, and have these kind of conversations face to face, not just in these cold digital settings. Let's bring it home.
Facebook and watch those Eli videos. They're great while working out, and that's what a partnership is. Thanks.
Amen, amen. So yes, we've got some, actually touching on all of these ideas that we addressed today. We've got a couple of videos in particular that I will highlight later. I think you'll all be interested in. But thank you all for watching. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining, and we'll see you next time on Eli on Air. Go off and be inspired, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.